and never will. There is no someday. There's only today. Real supermen don't leap over buildings in a single bound. They take small, determined steps consistently over time. It's not about finding out who you are, it's about creating who you are. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Ask yourself once, who do you want to be? And what are you willing to do to become that person?
I can't believe I have to follow that. Wow, she's incredible. Thank you very much, Alexis Gomez. Also, thank you to the Wright State Raider Army ROTC Battalion presenting our colors tonight. Let's give them a round of applause, too. Well, I'm very proud to be here. My name is Adam Arrow. I co-anchor the evening news for Fox 45 and ABC 22. And again, we are very proud to partner and sponsor this fantastic event. This is the DEA 360, the power of you. So, we're going to have fun. We're going to have a lot of fun, but we're also going to talk about a very serious topic tonight, and that's opioid abuse. Now, most of you here know that there's an opioid epidemic going on across our great country, right? There's no hiding from it. There's a lot of bad things happening there. So we want to come together, and that's what the DEA 360 strategy is about. It's about coming together and bringing different organizations together. The DEA's 360 strategy has launched in cities across America that's designed to tackle the cycle of violence and addiction associated with prescription opioid abuse as well as heroin abuse. So we obviously know that law enforcement plays a critical role in this, right? But they can't do it by themselves. Take a look around this room right here. You see all these tables of these great organizations? These are the organizations that help stop opioid abuse and give prevention ideas, prevent addiction, and stop that drug use in our area. So let's give these folks at these tables here a big round of applause. And that's what this event is about. It's about that partnership between law enforcement, between these great organizations that you see around here, many others as well. It's about bringing those resources together and tackling it and stopping young people from using any kind of drugs before they get started. So you're going to hear a lot of speakers tonight, a lot of personal and passionate, inspirational speakers tonight. I want to introduce a couple of people before we get started here. We could not have made this event happen without these next two guests. I want to welcome Special Agent in Charge Timothy Platson from the DEA, followed by our host for this amazing facility, that is Wright State University's Provost, Tom Sudkamp, as well as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, Ben Glassman. Guys?
Good evening. I appreciate all of you being here addressing the opioid epidemic in a different way as part of the DEA 360 strategy. This is going to be an exciting evening as you will hear from some great speakers and one spectacular entertainer, which you already have so far. You will learn how others have handled life-altering events and how when faced with those events, we all have the ability to persevere and find the resolve to rally in the face of adversity. And we are all facing adversity when it comes to the current heroin, fentanyl, and pill epidemic. Every day, more than 150 Americans die from drug overdoses. According to the Ohio Department of Health, unintentional drug overdoses caused the deaths of 4,050 Ohio residents in 2016. The Miami Valley area has been especially hard hit. Last year, Montgomery County had the highest rate of unintentional drug overdoses deaths in the state of Ohio. So far in 2017, preliminary statistics indicate that more than 500 deaths in Montgomery County were due to accidental drug overdoses. But as you all know, this issue is much deeper than just numbers. One death is too many. Several here likely have personal stories related to drug abuse and tragic deaths as a result. We must continue to put forth our best efforts to rid the Miami Valley of this poison. Tonight, we are also going to discuss how to get involved in your community and make a difference. Because one thing we have all learned in the fight against substance abuse, and specifically this epidemic, is if we are going to have any success, we will need to work this epidemic from all angles, from 360 degrees. I'd like to thank Wright State University for hosting all of us tonight and our impressive list of speakers that are participating in this important event. We are honored to have all of you here as we continue this fight together. Provost, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tom Sudkamp, Provost at Wright State University, and I have the privilege of welcoming you to our campus and to the Nutter Center here on Wright State University. I'd like to begin by thanking the DEA and all of the people who've worked so hard to put this event together for you. A university is a place of education. Tonight's presentations will provide you with education. It will also provide you with inspiration. And on top of that, they'll provide you with some outstanding entertainment. I hope as you're here, you listen, you're able to take something home, take a message, because as was just mentioned, there is an epidemic, and the way to fight it is by all of us working together. So again, thank you for being here at Wright State, and I hope you learn a lot from this evening's event.
Hey everybody, my name is Ben Glassman. I am the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio. That means that I'm the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Official for the bottom half of Ohio. And so it's from that perspective as the top prosecutor that I was going to ask you guys if you've ever been to a game, like a football game, basketball, hockey, volleyball, baseball, whatever, where one team looked like they didn't come to play at first, and they were just getting whooped, and it's a bloodbath, and you're wondering if you should keep watching. But then somewhere during the game, the home team's defense starts to make a few stops. The offense starts to put a few plays together, and somewhere you can kind of tell that the momentum is changing. That's where I believe we are right now. Pills, heroin, fentanyl, they were whooping us. We weren't ready to play, but we are now. Momentum is changing. It's changing because awareness is up, prevention is up, enforcement's up, and if we are going to work together, doing what we're doing right here tonight and every day going forward, we can turn the tide and we will win this battle. Thank you very much for being here.
Because of recovery, I've gone on to achieve 2 master's degrees. I am now the pastor of a church. You're talking about a person who was homeless, incarcerated, and had nothing. The world needs to know we're not throwaways and we're valuable commodities. And so my life has been dedicated to helping other people find freedom from active addiction and challenging those who don't believe that it can happen.
Our next speaker is a hero in the DEA, Special Agent Joe Persante. Joe was struck by enemy gunfire while on a counterterrorism and narcotics mission in Afghanistan back in 2011. He's the first ever member of the DEA to receive the Secretary of Defense Medal for the Defense of Freedom. The Defense of Freedom Medal is a civilian equivalent of the military's Purple Heart. He's received numerous awards from a variety of organizations, including the Federal Congressional Badge of Bravery from the United States Congress, and from his alma mater, Adrian College in Michigan, where he also played football. Persante's recovery from this life-threatening event has been nothing short of miraculous, and he's here to share an incredibly emotional and inspirational story with you. Please help me welcome Special Agent Joe Persante.
Yes. I don't know how much you heard the first go-around. Do you need me to start over? Okay. Good evening. My name is Joe Persante. I'm a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I've been in law enforcement since 1993. Prior to DEA, I was a police officer in the city of Detroit, Michigan, where my father was a police officer also. I grew up playing 3 sports, football, baseball, and hockey, and was lucky enough to play football in college. While in college, I decided to follow in my father's footsteps and become involved in law enforcement. When I graduated college in December of '91, I'm kind of dating myself, DEA was not hiring, so I took a job with the City of Detroit Police Department and then later got hired with DEA. While serving in DEA, I eventually tried out and was selected for our DEA's FAST team, which stands for Foreign Deployed Advisory and Support Team. It's kind of like DEA's overseas tactical team. Very hard selection, and the pass rate is not necessarily that high. So I got selected by the FAST team, and during the FAST team, we were deployed over to Afghanistan for approximately 120-day tours at a time. You're probably wondering, why is DEA over in Afghanistan? The reason being that the Taliban and these other insurgent groups get their funding for their terror activities a lot of times by the sale of illicit drugs. And one of the main drugs in Afghanistan, it's one of the top producers in the world of heroin. So we would work with U.S. Special Forces and Coalition Special Forces and some of our DEA agents that are assigned over in Afghanistan, and we would find out where they had these larger heroin labs, where they had stockpiles of chemicals and equipment to manufacture heroin. And we'd also go with the Afghani partner force, and we would raid these areas. And we would kind of mentor the Afghans show them how to process a scene and how to collect evidence and how to interview subjects. So that's why we're there in Afghanistan. I did my first tour in Afghanistan in 2010 summer spring tour, and it's a very busy time of the year there in Afghanistan. They call it fighting season, and it's where during that time a lot of the heroin is manufactured. Worked with 2 different ODA special forces teams that first year and did quite a few missions, and a lot of excitement going on. Made some good seizures also. Came back home, and we get to rest and decompress for a while, and then prepared to go to my second tour in Afghanistan, which was going to be the summer, early winter tour of 2011. Now, during this time, a lot of the U.S. Special Forces weren't available to do direct action type of missions, because they were doing village stability programs where they go out in a village and live with the population and try to get them to kind of see our ways of how we do things and our way of thinking. So another team stepped up, which was the Australian Commandos, which is an Australian Special Forces team that's really good, really solid individuals. But so they could only operate in the Helmand province, which is another big area for narcotics trafficking and heroin production. So we stepped in with them, and we started working, and we were just knocking them dead, making huge, huge seizures of labs, because the Taliban wasn't used to us being there. So we were just rolling through the tour, making great seizures, and then this bazaar came up on our radar called the Paik Bazaar in the Helmand province. And bazaars are like outdoor flea markets there, sell all type of things, to include lethal aid, weapons, and IED making material, along with chemicals and equipment to manufacture heroin. So we made arrangements that we were going to raid this bazaar on Halloween Day of 2011. So we hit the bazaar and pretty much immediately took gunfire, not very effective fire, and as the morning moved on, we started taking heavier fire. The Taliban kind of did their call to arms with their loudspeaker system. Today is your day to die. We must rid the infidels out of our land. You stand up and basically assault us. So the fire dramatically increased on us, and we were finishing processing the bazaar with all our evidence that we found, which we found quite a bit of stuff, and we were taking pretty heavy incoming fire. And we arranged for our airfield where they had a neurosurgeon and eye surgeon standing by. Even though the round didn't hit my eyes, the pressure of the round going through my head ruptured both my eye globes and attached both retinas really bad. So they worked on me there, and the next day I was flown en route to the United States, and I had to stay 3 days in Lohenstuhl, Germany at the medical facility there because the pressure in my head was rising. So once they got that under the control, they flew me back to the States where my family was waiting for me at Walter Reed National Naval Medical Facility in Bethesda, Maryland. I ended up spending a total of 2 months there, starting my recovery. I was in induced coma for a while, underwent numerous other surgeries, had to learn how to do basic things again, put clothes on, how to maneuver being blind, and kind of the trials and tribulations involved with that. Now, today we're talking about the DEA 360 program with the danger of the opiates and all the problems they're causing in our society. I knew, being in law enforcement so long, the problems that can be caused by the opiate-based painkillers. So knowing that, I wanted them to get me off the opiate-based painkillers as soon as possible. So I got weaned off as soon as I could, and while in the hospital, it's kind of eye-opening. Even though I couldn't see, my parents and teammates were telling me about all the young wounded service members coming back from Afghanistan, maimed up really bad. And here I am. I was older when this happened to me, and my daughter was about to graduate high school. These are young kids, some maybe not married, some maybe newly married with young kids, and it just makes you think, you know, there's always somebody that has it worse than you. So by sitting in that hospital, I made a vow to do as many things as I could do when I could see, now that I'm blind. And it wasn't always easy, and it was hard, but you can make a couple choices when bad things happen to you in life. And in life, a lot of bad things happen, unfortunately. You can hide in a corner and let life pass you by, or you can get out there and do as much as you possibly can do. And I made that choice to get out there and do as much as I possibly could do with my life. I didn't know what I could do or what I couldn't do, but you have to understand when there's a will, there's a way. If you want to do something, you can figure out a way. It might not be the same way you did it before. It might take you more time, but you can figure out a way to do it. So I got back into working out as soon as I can, as you probably cannot tell. I started competing again at a national bodybuilding level and doing very, very well. I hunt and shoot blind. You're like, Joe, if you have a gun, I don't want to be within 10 miles of you. But technology is amazing. They have an optic system that I can use, and I go hunting, and I've been deer hunting twice since I was blind, and I got shot 4 deer with 3 bullets. I got 2 for 1 the last time. I just recently went alligator hunting down in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we got 2 big gators, an over 11-footer and an 8.5-footer. I just recently went skydiving. Pretty much I'll try anything once within reason. So I keep going, and you know, life is different now. I have to learn to slow down a lot. I was a very type A personality before, and I didn't like to ask for help for people. Now, being blind, you have to ask for a lot of help. And I can't be in a hurry to do things because things take a lot longer and to do. And at first, I was nervous being in public. For being in law enforcement for so long, you always wanted to be aware of your surroundings. You're at somewhere, who looks shady, who doesn't, where are my exits, where are my entrances, where can I take cover and or concealment. So I was nervous. That was nerve-wracking at first, but I eventually got used to that, and it really doesn't bother me anymore. And I've dedicated my life. I can't do the job like I used to do it anymore, so I actually do a lot of this motivational speaking about overcoming adversity. So that now that I can't do the job like I used to, I get a lot of enjoyment by talking to groups such as this about dealing with your trials and tribulations, how to overcome them. I've never been a quitter in life. I was raised to work hard, you put a lot of effort into something, you try your best, and hopefully things will work out your way. And if they don't work out your way, you have to take a look at yourself and try to think, what can I do better? Am I doing something wrong? How can I be a better person? How can I do better to make myself more successful? And another thing that helped me survive is when I got shot, I was in really good shape. And that helped, that all the doctors said that helped your chance of surviving a traumatic injury a lot better, and your recovery goes well. And I also give a lot of credit to God, because 80% of the people who get my injury do not survive. And if the Lord wanted me dead in that field in Afghanistan that day, I would be dead. So he has more for me to do in this world, and I think spreading the word and message that I have is one of those things, and I get a lot of an enjoyment out of it. And I'll keep pushing forward. A lot of people ask me, how much sight do you have? Pretty much in my right eye, I have no sight. My left eye, I'm like 2400. Legally blind is 2200. I can tell where lights are at. I can see some shapes from time to time. But what's holding back the sight is the optic nerve and retina is very damaged. But they are working on stem cell stuff for that. So in 2 to 5 years, I can have more sight back. But if I don't get more sight back, I'll keep pressing on. You got to have that attitude that you, when things get hard and tough, that you don't quit, you don't give up. You stay in the fight. Things are hard, and things don't always work out your way, but you got to be prepared to deal with that. And unfortunately, a lot of people go to illicit drugs and alcohol now, but you just kind of resist the best you can, because it's not going to make your situation and your problem any better. I really enjoyed talking to you all tonight, so I hope you have a great rest of the evening, and thank you very much.
From the DEA to help combat America's devastating opioid crisis. The DEA's 360 program takes an innovative approach and focuses not just on enforcement, but on what I consider to be the keys to ending this epidemic: prevention and recovery. The agency is partnering with cities across the nation, including Dayton, to stop the cycle of use. This is a good place to start the healing, because Montgomery County actually has the highest rate of death from drug overdoses in Ohio. Preventing addiction requires a 360 approach. This starts with ending the silence and creating a safe environment so that we can talk about addiction just as openly as we talk about heart disease. Addiction is a chronic disease of the brain, not a moral failing. It's not a choice. The good news is, like other medical conditions, it is both preventable and treatable. Preventing addiction can start at home. The majority of young adults abusing opioids actually got them from family and friends. So it's important not just to talk about addiction, but also to get opioids out of your home. The DEA has special take-back days to give you an easy spot to get rid of them. The one thing no one dealing with this problem should feel is hopeless. Recovery is real. We have effective treatments, and people can get better and live normal lives. If you know someone who needs help or just want to know more, go to wakeup-dayton.com.
Perspective on addiction is that is 100% not a choice. It's a disease that can affect anybody. It can tear families apart without a second thought. I do believe, honestly, these people are doing it to themselves, but they can't help it. They need the support of people to lift them up. They believe all the negative things that are in the media. People say that they're junkies and they're a waste. They believe that about themselves. They really do. So they don't need that. What's going to change is us lifting them up and reaching out to them. That's what we need to do right now.
Well, how's everybody doing? You guys doing well out here? These are good speakers, aren't they? We got a lot more coming. We want to tell you about our next speaker that's coming up right now. All right, so our next speaker has dedicated his personal and professional life to assisting those battling addictions. Todd Crandall is the founder and president of Racing for Recovery, that helps those battling addiction by implementing a holistic lifestyle. Racing for Recovery has been featured on a variety of national news outlets and shows for the amazing, and we mean amazing, work it is doing as an organization. Todd is a licensed professional clinical counselor and chemical dependency counselor, and is also a dynamic speaker to a variety of audiences with one simple message: with sobriety, anything is possible. So without further ado, let's welcome in Todd Crandall. Guys, give him a big hand.
Good evening, everybody. How is everybody out there tonight? Okay, I've never started off a presentation like this before, so I'm going to do it this way. My mother committed suicide from her drug addiction when I was 3.5 years old. A few years later, my uncle killed himself from his drug addiction, and I just found out recently that my aunt killed herself. So let that sink in for a second. So when I'm up here talking to you guys today, or tonight rather, there's a couple things I want you to keep in mind. One thing, I never intended to grow up and be a homeless drug addict. The second thing I want to explain to everybody tonight is sobriety is possible. So let's talk about, in my opinion, how addiction takes place. I believe there's 4 key factors. First, there's a genetic predisposition. As I mentioned, my mother was addicted, my uncle was addicted, they both committed suicide. So genetically, yes. Do I have the traits to become drug addicted? Absolutely. The second component of becoming drug addicted is, I believe there's an emotional trauma. For me, when my mom committed suicide, at 3.5 years old, I couldn't comprehend on an intellectual level what her suicide did to me. But on an emotional level, could I feel what her choice to kill herself did to me? Absolutely, and I'll describe that in further detail as I move forward. The third component of drug addiction, I believe, is an environment that is conducive to drug or alcohol usage, and I put myself in that environment. The fourth component, I believe that my addiction was a choice. Nobody peer pressured me into using drugs. Nobody held a gun to my head and said, do cocaine. I made a cognizant choice, and therefore those key factors led to my being homeless and living in a car at one point. So as I said, my mom and my uncle both killed themselves. I was fortunate enough to have my dad get remarried, so I had a stepmom and I had a half-brother. I grew up in a community up in Toledo, Ohio, or near Toledo, Ohio. It's called Sylvania. It was the perfect, ideal upbringing. You know, I went to good schools, I wore nice clothes, I had money in my pocket, I had an abundance of friends, I had everything on the outside that any kid could want, including every opportunity to be somebody. What I didn't have, and I believe is the key factor in a lot of drug users that I counsel today, I had no self-esteem, I had no self-respect, I had no pride, I had no relationship with God. On the inside, I was absolutely terrified, thoughts of isolation, despair, loneliness. I just didn't feel right as a young kid. Fortunately for me, playing sports, that was my outlet. And when I was a young kid, I played hockey, thought I was going to be a professional hockey player, traveled throughout the United States, played up in Canada, played with guys that were going to go on and have NHL careers, and they did. And as a young kid, I had 2 things in my mind. A, I'm not going to end up the way my mom did, and B, I'm going to be a professional hockey player. So my life was planned out and for me. When I was in 8th grade, I was at a party one time with some kids, and there was alcohol there. And this is when I'm doing presentations at high school, I get into talking about peer pressure. And again, I wasn't peer pressured into trying alcohol for the first time. My curiosity got the better of me. I just wanted to see what alcohol tasted like. So I took a couple sips of beer that this guy had at the party. I didn't get drunk, but I knew that my life was turning in a different direction, and I was pretty certain it wasn't a good direction. So fast forward a couple of months, I'm now a freshman in high school. It's the first Friday of my freshman year. I'm meeting new kids, coming into high school for the first time, and we got together at a friend of mine's house whose parents were gone for the weekend. And we decided that we were going to have a couple of beers, and I use that couple of beers sarcastically. We're going to have a couple beers and then go up and watch our high school team play football. Well, I took an entire bottle of Jack Daniels and drank it, and I took some speed along with it. This is the second time I ever tried alcohol or drugs. Now, getting back to that genetic predisposition, this is where I believe my addiction kicked in full force. So I somehow managed to make it up to that football game. Totally blacked out, passed out in front of the football stadium, was turning blue, choking on my own vomit, could have been dying right there, and my friends panicked. They put me in the car, they drove me back to the house that we originally started drinking at, they put me in a bedroom, shut the door, and they thought everything was going to be okay. Well, that's how people die. Fortunately for me, I woke up the next morning, didn't know where I was, felt very sick, walked downstairs, saw all my friends sitting around the kitchen table, and they all were looking at me, and they had this very puzzled look on their face, and I'm kind of looking back at them like, what's going on? And they started talking about what I had done the night before. You know, it was, Todd, you should have seen you did this, and you should have seen you did that. I felt not only sicker physically than I ever had in my life, but all those feelings of not being good enough, not feeling adequate enough, those all came rushing back to me. And I felt embarrassed. I felt mortified. I said to myself, I'm never going to touch alcohol or drugs again. Addiction has a funny way of working its way back into your life. So when I vowed never to drink again because I didn't want to feel like that physically, I didn't want to feel like that emotionally, by the next weekend, I was back drinking again. So two things were happening to me during this stage of my life. One, the hockey career that I thought I was going to have was slowly starting to fade away. My choice to drink on the weekends was putting me in a position where I wasn't capable of playing hockey the next day when it was time to get on the ice. So the one thing in my life that was the most important thing to me, the one thing that gave me confidence, the one thing that gave me self-esteem, I was throwing it away because I was drinking every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. My story's not unlike anybody else who had drug or alcohol problems. I was starting to have problems with the local police. My grades started to suffer. The relationship that I had with the core group of good kids, kids that were doing their homework, kids that had relationships with God, kids that were going to school, kids that were playing sports, they started to disassociate themselves from me. They started saying, I can't help this friend of mine. He's continuing to drink. I have to save my own self, and we parted ways. I should have taken that as a sign of my life is falling apart. Instead, I took it as a sign of, see, I'm not good enough. I'm not even worthy of these good guys I grew up with. They're leaving me too. The feelings of abandonment were stronger than ever. And what did I do to cope with that? I started doing more drugs. So instead of just drinking on the weekends, I'm now starting to smoke pot, take acid, Quaaludes, Valiums, speed, anything I could get my hands on, and I was doing it on a daily basis. That's again where the genetic component of addiction is now starting to arise. An average day for me would be go to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning, drink a couple beers, and take 10 or 12 Valiums before school. I was that kid that was now snorting drugs during class, selling drugs out of my locker, taking so many drugs that I'm throwing up capsules of drugs in the toilet, sticking my hand in the toilet, grabbing the drugs back out and eating them again. 16 years old. This was a drug problem. But to me, it was becoming normal. I wasn't equating it with the fact that I had a drug problem. I was finally starting to look at this and saying, I think I'm going to end up the way my mom did. And the isolation, the embarrassment, the low self-esteem, the guilt, the loss of opportunities, they just kept adding and adding and adding. By the time I was a senior in high school, I still had the hope that I was going to get a scholarship at Ohio State University and play hockey, because I understood how important an education was, and I did want to salvage that hockey career. But I made one of the biggest mistakes in my life at that point, and that was to try cocaine for the first time. I don't need to stand up here and lecture everybody on how addicting that drug is. I'm just here to tell you that everything you hear about cocaine is in fact true. Two things happened to me the first time I did coke. I knew I was finding the thing that I was searching for in the drug world, and the second thing was I knew I was in trouble. Halfway through my senior year in high school, I was doing cocaine on a hockey bus going to one of our games up in Michigan, and I got caught. As a result of being caught with cocaine, I was kicked off our hockey team, expelled from high school, and when my parents found out what I had done, I was removed from my house. So I want to talk about how I was feeling then. As an 18-year-old man at this point, I remember it was a Tuesday morning and I had no high school to go to. The phone rings. I hear my dad talking on the phone. It's the school telling him what his son had done. I hear my dad marching down the hall of our house. The door to my bedroom comes swinging off the hinges. All my hockey trophies got knocked over and they're laying on the floor. There's my father standing in the doorway, looking at his son who has just been expelled from high school for cocaine use, and he has tears running down his eyes, and he said, "This is the worst day of my life since your mother committed suicide." I knew at that point that what I had done was not good. But here's the difference. First thing, I didn't care what drugs were doing to me. And the second component was I was blaming everybody else. I wasn't taking responsibility for my choices. I was blaming the school for kicking me out of high school. I was blaming my hockey coach for kicking me off the hockey team. I wasn't being accountable and looking at my low self-esteem, my suicidal thoughts, and the fact that I didn't want to live because I was doing drugs and just simply asking for help. But again, when you're addicted to drugs, you're not thinking clearly. So as I said, I was kicked out of my parents' house. I found myself living in my car. I got fired from a job that I had, and my first of 3 drunk driving charges, all in a period of about a week. So I'm, spending time in crack houses. I was going through days where I didn't have anything to eat, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to quit doing drugs, but I didn't like the consequences of what my drug addiction was doing. So I called my father back. I begged him to let me come back home. And my dad agreed. He said, "You can move back to our house, but you're going to do 2 things. 1, you're going to remain drug-free. 2, you're going to go back and finish your high school education." And of course I said, I agree to both of those, but I only upheld one of them. I went back to high school and I graduated because I knew I needed an education, but I wasn't ready to quit doing drugs. On a physical level, my drug addiction at this point, I'm drinking 2 bottles of whiskey a day. I'm starting to have liver damage, stomach problems. When you're waking up in the morning, puking blood, and then having a drink to calm your nerves, that's a problem. When you're snorting so much cocaine that your nose is dropping blood out of it and you're snorting blood and the cocaine right back up your nose, that's a problem. To me, it was a way of life. I did enroll in the University of Toledo during this time. I wanted to be a normal person. I wanted to be like my friends. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to have a relationship with God. But I was failing at it miserably because I was constantly using drugs. On October 6th of 1986, I was out drinking and doing drugs when I should have been in school, and I came home very intoxicated. Stumbled through the front door of my house. There's my dad standing there with that same disgusted look on his face about what his son was doing with his life. He starts yelling at me about my choices. My stepmom came into the room. She started yelling at me about my choices, and all of those feelings I had as a young kid of abandonment, isolation, frustration, anger, sadness, everything came to a boiling point, and it led to a physical confrontation. Not a physical confrontation, a physical assault on my part. I beat up my parents. I punched them. I kicked them. I threw them. It was horrific. I'm standing here before you again tonight, and I'm mortified by what I had done. That's what drugs were doing to me. My choices got me removed from my parents' house again. I found myself back living in my car, and I thought, I got to get away from Toledo, Ohio. I'm going to run away to Florida. All my problems are going to be solved when I get down there. Nothing changed for me when I was down in Cocoa Beach, Florida, except I started doing other types of drugs because I needed more to keep that drug addiction going. Started smoking crack, doing crystal meth. I spent Christmas Day that year of 1986 sitting on the beach drinking a bottle of vodka in the rain and simply wondering, where did my life go? What happened to me? Why am I here by myself when I thought I was going to be in the NHL playing hockey? I called my dad back again. I begged him, please let me come home. I promise I'll quit doing drugs, which was a lie. But I was desperate to have a roof over my head. My dad said, you're not moving home. We're going to stick by holding our family together. We don't want you in our house anymore. We don't trust you. We don't believe in you. We love you, but we don't trust you. But he did agree to let me rent one of his apartments in our hometown of Sylvania, Ohio. And it was pretty convenient because it was real close to our local police station. So anytime I got arrested, I didn't have far to go when they carted me off to jail. But once I got back into my hometown and had a roof over my head, a couple of things happened. One, it's no shock that I started picking up my drug addiction again and started doing heroin and all these other things. But all the core group of drug buddies, drug friends in quotes, that I never were calling me when I was in jail, never answered the phone when I was starving, never contacted me when I was in Florida. Guess what happened as soon as I was back in town and had drugs again? They all were knocking on my door. And when you're a person that doesn't value who you are, you think that's real friendship. And I fell into that trap. 13 years of this misery went on. On April 15th of 1993, I received my third and final drunk driving charge. It was the greatest gift that God and my dead mom had ever given to me. I registered a .36 on a breathalyzer at noon. That's heavily intoxicated. Again, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because from that day to this very moment, I have been drug and alcohol free. This is where my story gets fun. I don't like talking about the bad. This is what I like talking about. So, here I am. I am a 26-year-old man. My physical health is shot. No relationship with God. No money. No education. No family. No friends. But I had one thing, a desire to get better. That was it. I knew the same effort that I had put into my self-destructive ways for 13 years that culminated with a DUI and a gun in my mouth a couple of times. Not really wanting to die, not knowing how to live. When I got sober, I was going to not only live, I was going to thrive in that life. So I spent every day learning about addiction, going to traditional 12-step meetings, talking to people in recovery who had what I wanted, reading books, watching movies, doing anything that I could to get better. And surprisingly, it was working. One of the first things that I did, though, when I was detoxing from drugs, I got back into physical exercise. That whole athleticism that I had as a young kid, it's the only thing that worked for me when I was coming into recovery. So I utilized it. I started exercising, healing my body not only physically, but it was improving mentally, spiritually, and emotionally as well. I wanted to learn about why I was still suicidal, how I could fully recover as a person. So I picked up my hockey career. I managed to play semi-pro hockey for the Toledo Storm back in 1996. And thank you. But once I was done with that, I wanted to figure out what else I could do in my life of recovery. I went back to school. I got an undergrad in business, and ironically, I became a pharmaceutical sales representative. Yes, you can laugh at that. It's funny. But I sold a drug for external genital warts, so I figured I was safe doing that, right? So here I am. I've got a college degree in business. I met my beautiful wife during this time. I started having a couple kids, bought my own home. I was a productive member of society, once again on the outside. On the inside, I still was battling suicidal thoughts and not finding my life's purpose. I kept thinking to myself, why is it when I have everything on the outside, it's not making me feel well on the inside? So during this time also, I started doing this crazy little event called the Ironman Triathlon. It's a real tiny event. It's where you swim 2.4 miles, you bike 112 miles, and then you run 26 miles. So I started doing this Ironman as a way to take the negative addiction and turn it into a new focus of a balanced, holistic lifestyle. It was not only a physical part, it was helping me emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. I came back from New Zealand in 2001 after doing my 4th Ironman. Our local newspaper runs a story about my life. Former addict turns into Ironman. The response was overwhelming. Guys I did drugs with were calling me. Teachers I had were calling the house. Cops that had arrested me were all calling the house. Everybody said the same thing. I can't believe you're alive, and I can't believe what you're doing in your recovery. It literally was during this time frame that I thought, I can do something with my life. I can find purpose, find value, find who I'm supposed to be on this earth. The thought came to me, I'm going to start a program called Racing for Recovery. I simply wanted to do 2 things: prevent substance abuse in kids, help kids who are battling trauma, who come from divorced families, who come from physical abuse, God forbid sexual abuse or emotional abuse, kids that don't value who they are. I wanted to help them before they ended up like me. The second part, I wanted to show current substance abusers, their family, their friends, and their communities that with sobriety, anything is possible. So I started this federally approved nonprofit, Racing for Recovery. All I wanted to do was an annual 5K run, the way Race for the Cure had done for breast cancer. We're actually holding our 16th annual 5K this Sunday up in Toledo. But that's all I wanted to do, was do a 5K run, raise some awareness, possibly some money for drug prevention, give it back and help some people. Well, it was during this time that people were calling me and they were saying, do you have another support group meeting format that is different than the traditional format? I loved AA. I loved NA. I loved CA. I learned a lot from those awesome programs. But I was looking for something more in my own recovery, and when I was starting to get phone calls from people that wanted something else, I thought, well, let's combine everybody into one environment. I can relate to my substance abuser friends all day long. We can talk about all the stories. I wanted to hear from my family, my friends, and my community about my choice to use drugs, what it did to them. And on the other side, I wanted my family and the community to understand what it's like to walk in our shoes as a drug-addicted person. So our support group meetings, which we have 10 of them a week, have everybody in one environment so everybody can be supported, educated, and we all can come together to find the solution of addiction and emotional traumas. This program since 2001 has reached thousands of lives worldwide. I've gone on personally to get a master's degree in counseling. I'm now a licensed professional clinical counselor, so I can diagnose clients, but I can't prescribe medications. I am proud of the fact that I now have people who are working with me, not for me, with me. We have a building back in Toledo, Ohio, that does remarkable services every day simply to help people. Drug and alcohol assessments, educational groups, support group meetings, spirituality meetings, yoga sessions. We're doing everything we can to help people live a balanced, holistic lifestyle. I 100% believe that that's critical in recovery. It's not about just not using drugs. We have to help people understand why they were choosing to use drugs, heal from that trauma, and help them build healthy and productive lifestyles. That's what Racing for Recovery does. In closing, I just want to say this. There's 3 words that I live by today: empathy, humility, and gratitude. I am so thankful that I'm alive, that I survived a drug addiction, that I have 4 amazing kids, a beautiful, supportive wife, amazing friends, a body that still works, a mind that somewhat still works. Some more sarcasm there. But most importantly, I have found purpose to simply give back what has been so graciously given to me, and through the support of many people that I'm proud to call friends that work with me, that support Racing for Recovery, to give everything that has been given to me and give it back and watch other people grow. It's the best feeling I've ever had in the world. I made one choice to try alcohol at the age of 13. It ruined my life for 13 years. I made one cognizant choice to stop using drugs on April 15th, 1993. It was the catalyst to give me everything that I was searching for when I was doing drugs. The gift of recovery is the greatest thing you can ever give yourself, and it's the best blessing that your friends and family will benefit from. I appreciate you guys listening to me today. We have a plethora of information to us. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a story. And there's so many stories like this tonight, guys. We're just getting started. Our next speaker is Sarah Nerad. She's been in recovery since 2007. She's made it her life purpose to create the same opportunities that she had to enter and sustain recovery for other young people across the country. Previously, Sarah worked at Ohio State with a mission to create the opportunities that she had to sustain her recovery while at Texas Tech for other students. She currently does TED Talks and works at Alkermes, a global biopharmaceutical company, as the Associate Director of Community Relations for Ohio. In this role, she'll be working with various addiction-related stakeholders to end the opioid epidemic. Higher education will remain a focus of her work, as our nation's colleges and universities are uniquely positioned to make a difference in the lives of students in or seeking recovery. Please give it up for Sarah Nerad.
Y'all, my name is Sarah Nerad. I'm a young person in long-term recovery, which for me means I've not used drugs or alcohol since August 16th of 2007. It's an honor and privilege to be able to be here with all of y'all this evening to share a little bit about my recovery journey and the things that were really important to me and really helpful to me. You know, because it's rare to be so young and have so many years of sustained recovery. And this is a reality that a lot of us know, and we need to create these same opportunities for other people. So thank you to the event organizers for inviting me and for all of you for showing up tonight. So I think I've already dropped y'all twice. So I'm from Houston, Texas. I was born and raised there. And, you know, an average, you know, middle-class suburban family. I did really well in school. I had friends. You know, I think my adverse childhood experience, right, like my ACEs score is 0. Like there wasn't anything in my upbringing, anything in my behavior that would have indicated that I would have had a substance use disorder. You know, and so I found myself in high school wanting to practice drinking. I was getting ready to go to a senior homecoming party with some of my girlfriends, and I wanted to practice drinking, right? I wanted to be able to fit in and seem like I knew what I was doing. You know, but what I didn't know is that I was predisposed to addiction. and that this was something that, by me practicing drinking, ultimately ended up in, all the things that I wanted to prevent from happening. Getting sick at parties, embarrassing myself. What ended up happening was because I had started to practice drinking, I got grounded and then couldn't even go to that homecoming party that I was, so desperate to go to and look cool at. So from the very beginning with my drinking, I was getting in trouble. I was started to experience a lot of consequences. And this disease it's progressive. And so it started out as something that, I was only going to do on the weekends with my girlfriends, became something that I wanted to do as often as possible. I was willing to stop doing things that, at one point in time brought me a lot of joy and meaning and purpose. I sacrificed activities, I switched peer groups, I started to get in trouble at home, right? These consequences that we experience. I found myself at 16 years old entering my first residential treatment center. And that was cool, I guess, They took us to get snow cones. There were boys there. I thought it was fun, It was a new experience, and intellectually I understood why I was there. I got it, I was using alcohol and other drugs that was against what my parents wanted, and therefore there are consequences, right? I got why I was in treatment. But I just didn't feel it in my heart. This was just disconnected. And I also knew that I wasn't done yet. I verbalized that. I said, I haven't had enough yet. I am not done yet. So it was only a matter of time when I came back home, and I didn't change my people, places, and things. I can say that. I did not change my people, places, and things when I came back from treatment that first time. So it was only a matter of, a few short months until I was right back where I had been before, doing the exact same things I had been doing. And it's where my addiction ended up taking me wasn't anywhere that I thought it would ultimately end up being. When I first started drinking, with those girlfriends, I didn't think it would result in IV heroin use. I didn't think it would result in going to treatment multiple times. I didn't think it would result in hurting those around me, causing, my parents to worry and to fret about where I was and what I was doing. But that's what happens. I quickly lost that power of choice in what I was doing. So I found myself at 17 going back to residential treatment. I had just started my junior year of high school, and this time I was faced with, I had two options my parents presented me. I could either come back home, enter recovery, play by their rules, or I could be emancipated and go to an all-girls boarding school in Montana. And I thought Montana sounded terrible, right? All girls, there weren't going to be any boys there, probably a lot harder to get drugs. So my plan was, let's come back home, fool everybody, play along with their little game for 6 months. Maybe by then my sister will be the bad kid, and so all the attention will be on her, right? Let's just buy some time so we can go back and do what we're doing. But by going through the motions of recovery, right, going to recovery support meetings, hanging out with all the young people in recovery in my community, going to intensive outpatient following treatment, right, doing all these things that were part of my treatment and recovery plan, I ended up being fooled. I ended up coming to really want recovery for me. I ended up, really being given this gift, of at a really young age being able to make a huge change in my life and see where this was going to ultimately lead. And I'm so grateful that I was able to see that then. And it was hard. I really felt like I was missing out on a lot. Back then, the things that I were concerned about was, who am I going to hang out with? Who am I going to go to prom with? What is my social life going to be like? I felt like my life was over entering recovery at 17 years old. That's really how it felt for me. And I'm so grateful that my community of Houston, Texas, had this robust youth recovery continuum of care, because I instantly was not pulled into, I jumped into willingly this really exciting, cool group of young people in recovery, where we did social events together. We hung out after meetings. We had meetings after meetings after meetings with each other. We still stayed up late, right? So I went from, having a group of peers that, we weren't good for each other, we got into trouble, but had our own sense of culture and norms, to now finding a new positive alternative peer group. where we supported one another and challenged one another to do the right thing and to grow as young people in recovery. So it was that community, right? Having supports for high schoolers in recovery, having supports for young adults in recovery. I went, after high school, I then went to my community college because I was really worried about going off to college and living in a dorm. That was really scary for me. I didn't know who would my roommate be. What if they drank? What if they smoked pot, in the room, and I had to be trapped in there with them? I was really worried about what college would be like for me and leaving behind my whole foundation of recovery support. So I chose to stay at home, go to the community college, and eventually I transferred to Texas Tech because they have one of the country's oldest and largest collegiate recovery programs. Because I knew that I needed that. And I was willing to stay at home a few more years living with my parents because my recovery was that important to me. I was willing to sacrifice that and put my recovery first. So I went off to Lubbock, Texas to go, finish my degree and had this awesome experience being with all of these other young people in recovery, doing school, doing college together. And I don't feel like I missed out on anything. I don't feel like I missed out on this, typical college experience. I had a college experience that was fulfilling to me and meaningful. And so it was through that experience that ultimately brought me here to Ohio. I got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to Ohio State, finish my master's degree, and start their collegiate recovery program. So it's been, an incredible gift of my recovery to go from being the recipient of services to now starting and operating and advocating for those services that had a direct impact on me and my recovery. So I was at Ohio State for about 4.5 years building that program. I hope to see one be started here at Wright State. And that was awesome to be there with all the students, everything from recovery housing, sober tailgates, to peer support right there on campus. We basically had a clubhouse smack dab in the middle of campus where everyone in recovery could come and gather and support one another, because it is a unique experience and we need to be supported and validated in what that's like. And so recently I had a new opportunity to come and work for Alkermes, do community relations work for them. And so I'm just loving getting to continue to be challenged, in my recovery and my professional development, learn new things. I think that's something I've really learned about recovery for me, is that I need to always be kind of pushing myself, being excited about something, learning and growing. Anytime I stay a little too comfortable, I get into trouble. So I love this new opportunity and everything that I get to experience and learn about. And so I think about the theme of this, right? Like the power of you. And for me, the power of me is my story. This lived experience that I have, and not being afraid to share it with other people, because it is only by me sharing this experience that I think we can break down some stigma, about who is impacted by this. What do we look like? What are we capable of after treatment? We're capable of a lot when properly supported. They say that your rate of relapse drops down to about 15% if you've maintained your recovery for 5 years. But we don't treat addiction with 5 years of recovery supports. We tend to get 28 days. So if I leave you with anything, it's that we need to be building out the continuum of care so that folks can get ongoing treatment and recovery support services for at least 5 years, because that's where we're going to stop growing our number of overdose deaths and rather start growing the number of Americans that are in recovery. That's the number we need to be growing. And so it's right? Like a good number. So it's by building out that continuum of care, coming forward and sharing our stories and the experiences that we have will ultimately help to shape that, and then giving patients, patient-centered care, where they have the ability to be informed of their treatment options and make the right decision for them and have access to all of the options that are available to them. And again, that starts with us. That starts with the power of us. That starts with the power of our community coming together and advocating for what we need and the gaps that we see. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here to share my story and hopefully leave you with some hope and some new ideas to leave here. So thank you so much.
You all hear me? Great, it's good to be here. Good evening, my name is Ryan Hampton, and I'm a person in recovery from heroin addiction. What that means to me is that today I'm able to be a son, a brother, a friend, a writer, an activist, and a voice for my community. What it also means is that I haven't had a mind-altering substance, most importantly to me, heroin or opioids, since February 2nd, 2015. Thank you. And I don't say that lightly. Just saying the word addict out loud sometimes still puts many people on edge, as you may know. But today I want to tell you a short story, and it happens to be my story. By sharing who I am, I've learned that it is possible to change the hearts and minds of people who only see us through one set of glasses. More importantly, it helps to open doors for people like us who are reaching out and looking for help. My addiction story is not unique. In fact, I'm sure it's similar to the experience that many of you have gone through that are here this evening. I became addicted to opioids in 2003. It started with a prescription for painkillers, and it escalated quickly until I was homeless, broke, and using heroin. I was ashamed to admit for quite some time that I was in over my head. The stigma of addiction was so powerful that it kept me silent for years, actually a decade. I was positive that if I told anybody that I had a problem, I'd lose everything. And ironically, my inability to speak up kept me trapped for 10 years. Only when I was on the verge of dying, when my addiction had taken everything from me, did I finally find my voice. Today, I know that it is okay to ask for help, reach out when I have a problem, and talk openly and proudly about my recovery. Many people die without ever knowing that help is even out there. That list includes some of my closest friends, and I consider myself today one of the lucky ones. But recovery should never be about luck. It took years for me to admit that I had a problem, and many, many attempts at finding help before I was able to recover. In this journey, I have experienced every kind of prejudice, discrimination, and obstacle. Once I made it to the other side, I knew I had to take a stand, not only for myself, but for my community. You see, there are 22 million people in this country who suffer from a substance use disorder. Statistics show that many of them may not make it for reasons such as being denied basic medical care for their life-threatening illness. We cannot let that happen. We must not let the power of recovery go unnoticed. We must show that it works. We are all living proof that the crisis in front of us is not an insurmountable task, but we need to do our part, every single one of us. A little over 18 months ago, I started telling my story. And strangely enough, people started listening. But I wasn't talking about my illness, my addiction. I began to share my recovery and what my experience looked like for me and my community. We all know what it's like to struggle in active addiction. What's missing are stories like mine and yours and so many others. Stories that shine a light on what's possible when we can make it to the other side. I've watched my story and the story of my friends and those closest to me help open other people's minds and actually affect the way that outsiders treat our community. You know, we can throw around as much data as we want when it comes to the opioid crisis and addiction, but nothing compares to the power of one person relating to another. My story happens to empower others, and our collective stories can transform the addiction narrative and bring real, tangible change. My story has linked me to many others on this same path. You know, my entire adult life, I was searching for meaning and purpose. Little did I know that it was sitting right in front of me the entire time. It is in front of you too. And I urge you to go out into your communities, lift up your voices, and share the message that we are people too. People in recovery and people suffering from addiction are people too. I know my story because I've lived it. But today I sit in this full room with all of you, and you have a story too. We all have a story to tell. And when we reach out, rise up, and speak about our experiences, we become powerful beyond measure. We can create change that saves lives. We can open doors for people who need help and transform the way that we are treated as a community. We can stop the drug epidemic, which claims hundreds of lives every week. We can strengthen our communities, lift one another up, and share the message that recovery from addiction is possible. It is up to you. It is up to us. When we leave here today, we must take steps to redouble our efforts and take this crisis on in our homes and in our communities. We do that simply by raising our voices and not being silent anymore. I have shared mine with you today, and it is my honor to be here to learn from yours. Thank you very, very much.
As a person in long-term recovery from an illness that has no cure, but an illness that has a solution.
I would not be standing here today, continue bettering myself as a man, as a father, owning a home. Everything that recovery has given me today, I got it. So now it's my turn to teach you that recovery works.
You have a group of people who are the humblest people I've ever met on this earth, but their spirits are strong. You can feel the spirit of that person yearning for recovery, and you can feel that same spirit when people have totally internalized and embraced this whole recovery program. It's like a light shining inside of people.
We laid the groundwork. The voices are out there. We have the science. We have the data. We have to find and open the hearts. And I think those hearts want to be open. I absolutely believe it.
If we were to be the face and voice of recovery and go tell our story, tell it every chance we got to everybody we came in touch with, we can reverse probably at least 50% of those people, make believers out. We're not going to get everybody to believe. That'll never happen. But by God, we can turn half of them around, because those same people did not believe that a woman should vote. And if you go further back in history, them same people didn't believe that a black person should vote or be a citizen. So as history goes by, history's on our side. History will show one day who and what we are. So I say we make history. That's what I say.
Powerful, powerful. All these speakers today have been incredibly powerful, and we have a couple of more. All right, so we got a treat for you with our next speaker. He is an award-winning producer, cinematographer, conflict photographer, whose work has engaged with many of the most important international and domestic issues and events for more than a decade. Lucian Reed is the co-creator of America Divided, an Epix original, limited docuseries featuring narratives around inequality in education, housing, healthcare, labor, criminal justice, and the political system, all woven into an 8-story, 5-part series. Lucian's going to be showing a clip of this series, which took place right here in Dayton. So please help me welcome Lucian Reed to the stage.
which obviously is the opioid crisis that Dayton has faced, the country is facing. And I just wanted to say, when we were here, we saw a lot of really tough things. But one of the things I really came away from that experience with was how many amazing people that I met here. People who were working incredibly hard, who dedicated, their days and nights to doing something about the crisis. And obviously, it's an event like this is also, wouldn't exist if it weren't for all the hard work and all the education and all of the care and all the concern that so many people in the community have been showing, in the face of this crisis. But I just wanted to. It was incredibly inspirational, and I wanted to say that right off the top. But let's go ahead. I'll just show a little bit of the clip. Basically, the series was sort of designed to be this kind of large documentary series using kind of celebrated people in the role of correspondents. And so we came here with the actor Peter Sarsgaard, who's had his own struggles with alcoholism and has close members of his family who have also dealt with drug addiction. And he came here, like I said, in the role of the journalist to meet people to sort of investigate the crisis. We spent a lot of time with the Dayton Police Department. We spent a lot of time with East End Community Services and a lot of other great organizations here. And so you'll just see a couple of quick clips from that piece, and then we'll move right on to the panel with a lot of really great people. So I guess go ahead.
My ex-wife was an addict. My stepson died from a heroin overdose. My nephew died 6 months ago from a heroin overdose. And my son died 75 days ago from a heroin overdose. He died the day after Christmas. Jesus. Alone in his house. There's not a day of my life in the past 30 years that addiction hasn't taken its toll on me in one form or another. Thank you.
There's so much I don't understand about this crisis, but the struggle of families I know too well. In Dayton, Families of Addicts has become a place where those caring for addicts come to care for one another. Herself a former addict, Lori Arion founded the group with the aim of ending the shame and hopelessness felt by so many.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it is going to take more than us just talking about it. We need to figure out what to do as a community.
We have people that are seeking recovery. We have people that are in recovery and families. And we all come together to help each other.
My cousin, none of us knew anything. We didn't know the beginnings of, we didn't know the first step.
You become really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we all become knowledgeable together. But at the end of the day, the addict needs to want to get better. Does anybody have any kind of progress that they would like a milestone for today?
My name is Kevin. I'm an addict. Okay, so I got 105 days clean today. Through this whole thing, it's been really rough. I put my family through a lot, and I just wanted to tell my sisters that I love you.
I'm told I will see some fresh approaches in one of the most unlikely places in the city. Called Twin Towers by the locals for the two towers reaching up from St. Mary's Church, the neighborhood was traditionally a tight-knit working-class neighborhood. It's now the epicenter of Dayton's drug epidemic. Here I find two exceptional women working to ensure the community's future. As part of her work at the East End Community Center, Emily Sirico takes a message of hope out into the community, telling anyone who will listen how to find treatment.
Specifically in East Dayton, we have had a lot of overdoses happening in the last few months. And so a team of us have been going out to respond, to try to capitalize on an opportunity with that individual to get them into treatment. I'm Emily. I work with East End Community Services. Nice to meet you.
Ellen Mays walks the halls of Ruskin Elementary, where she runs an after-school program for Dayton's neediest children. Her goal is to help a new generation escape the clutches of addiction.
I want to welcome everybody to the 3rd annual Miracle Maker Musical.
How long have you guys known each other?
7th grade?
7th grade, yeah.
That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
I've been in this exact area with a dealer, an addict, the police. How do you guys see this community?
I see a group of people that want to take their community back.
I spoke to Joe Hale, who's a lawyer who's been, fighting this crisis for a long time. And when I asked him what he felt like could be done, he said he didn't feel like there was a solution. What do you think?
There is a solution to it, and the solution is tackling poverty. Living in poverty is trauma. It's 100% trauma, especially with children. Easton first started, and they went around to the community asking, what can we do for you? The family said, our children have no dreams. Give our children some dreams, or show them how to actually dream. The goal is to give them the opportunity to explore their talents, their passions, what's going to prevent those particular children from ending up in a cycle of drug abuse.
I think that in and of itself can just be huge.
We have to take an integrated approach to the problem. Nonprofits are coming to the table. The city's coming to the table. We have neighbors coming to the table. We have the hospitals, the sheriff's coalition, all these different groups coming together. We can tackle this.
Yeah.
Giving up is just not an option whatsoever. We owe it to somehow figure out what we can do to make a difference in the lives of others.
You don't walk away from a situation. You do the most you can, and you bring your whole power pack with you to do that, because collectively we can do much more. It sounds like the gentleman you spoke to is feeling disheartened because he's lost a battle, a pretty big battle. But we might have fallen once or failed once, but you get back up and you try again until we find the solution. What's the alternative?
Panelists, please.
I have fan.
Can I get a little closer to them? I feel like I'm really far away. Is that possible? Is that going to mess up the lights?
I don't know, but if you can stand
right like whoever that is, right here.
That thing is brutal.
It's very bright up here. So I guess I'll just go ahead and each of the panelists sort of introduce yourselves and let us know how you came to be here.
My name's Billy. I'm a recovery advocate with Families of Addicts.
My name is Danielle, and I am in a youth-led prevention group.
Let's unite. Let's just share.
My name is Mary Huber, and I'm the program director of the Chemical Dependency Graduate Program here at Wright State. And I train graduate students to be counselors in chemical dependency. I do a lot of community work and a lot of research in the area of addiction.
Hey y'all, Sarah Neerad again.
Can you hear me on this thing? So, questions? I want to start out with Mary for this first question and then kind of open it up afterwards. So what changes have you seen here in Dayton in the last years in the way people are acknowledging and addressing the crisis?
Well, that's a good question, since I've been here 4 years, so I can talk about the last 3 years. There's been a lot of changes in the community as far as community providers, law enforcement, researchers, educators, and it's sort of been an acknowledgement of how severe the problem is. So it's almost like, people could see, years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, people could see opiates and heroin becoming a problem. But when, the sheriff's office and Dayton police were getting so many people who were being jailed and detoxing and law enforcement, then they became involved. And then more community partners had to become involved. And then, we brought on Project Dawn and the Narcan training. And so it's really evolved in a healthy way, in a good way. It's unfortunate that a crisis has to occur to get people involved, to get providers involved, to get community members involved, but we're headed in the right direction.
How about you, Billy?
I'm sorry, just one more time. You're asking me what's changed in the last 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, how have you seen the response change during the last 2 or 3 years?
Well, okay, so I've only been clean 2 of those years. You know that, right? Okay, so I think the community involvement with local grassroots groups has really sprung up, and also the government has, law enforcement especially, has really stepped up. This event is a very good example of that. I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is that I think more people are telling their stories about recovery and success, and I also think that just the fact that it's so prevalent here, everybody knows somebody that's affected by this. So I think you're seeing a much bigger response. I think we're moving in the right direction.
So I am a member of a youth-led prevention group. I'm actually a high schooler. I'm a senior in high school, and I have been in a youth-led group called BOLD, Building Our Lives Drug-Free, for the past 3 years. And during these times, we have really changed our focus from information to the environment, to social media, using social media to create a positive message. And that's really something, especially to resonate with teens and students. I know we have a Twitter page, which we bring positive messages. We show that we are a support system for people who need it.
And for all of you in your work, how has sort of silence and stigma, how has it played a part in what you do? How has that changed in sort of the same time frame we're talking about? Anybody?
All right, I guess that's me. Yeah, so I think, certainly misperceptions about who people with substance use disorders are, who people in recovery are, still exist. That's why I think it's so awesome that a lot of us are starting to speak up, to show that we can and do recover, to show that, what used to define us no longer has to today, that we can kind of go on and be who we were always intended to be and do the things that we were always intended to do. But stigma certainly keeps people from accessing treatment. We know that's one of the main reasons why people don't. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to access the services that they need. This impacts them in the workplace, right? So if you have a criminal record, then you get this extra stigma affiliated with being able to get a job. And so we see this on a lot of different levels, because to be able to sustain our recovery, we need to have safe, stable, sober housing. We need to have a good job that provides us, a livable wage and meaning and purpose in our lives. We need to be able to go to school if that's what we want to do. So stigma needs to be addressed in all of these areas so that we have what we need to be successful for the long haul.
Yeah, let me just add, fortunately, it's getting a little bit better. There still is really a lot of stigma around heroin in particular, because heroin, people immediately think of needles. And when you think of needles, you think of, really sort of people living under bridges and doing whatever they can, and it's just sort of a dirty thing. And fortunately, that is changing a little bit. If you look at the evolution of alcoholism and how that stigma has been reduced, although alcohol is a legal drug, which is different, but fortunately, I think that the more work we do and the more we show that addiction can happen to anybody, it's not, the person under the bridge, it's not, the 19-year-old breaking into houses, it's you and me, and it's showing that this is a disease, and a disease that has not a cure, but a disease that people can live with and function and recover from.
Can I? Yeah, okay. So the needle thing is real. So even in the addict community, those of us that use needles are looked down upon by those that didn't. And honestly, I'm not sure that the overall public stigma has changed a whole lot, but I can tell you, for me personally, the more that I talk about it, the less that it bothers me, the less that I let it affect my life. But it's definitely still out there. I noticed it recently. I've been looking for a job, and I hadn't worried about it until I was put in front of a potential employer for an interview and had to tell them why I hadn't been working for the past 3 years. So but I do definitely think that the more I talk about it and put it out there, the less it bothers me, for sure.
And is that, I mean, for both of you who are in recovery, is that why you made the decision to come out and be communicators and be public people? Because, you know, let me turn that around. I mean, how did you make that decision to come out and really sort of speak publicly and advocate? What was the moment for either one of you that led you to do that?
Yeah. So I can say for me, I never was really quiet about my recovery. Like, I thought this was really cool. You know, everyone knew I was on drugs. Like, why would I then keep my recovery quiet? That never made sense to me. Now, I certainly respect the anonymity of the 12-step fellowship, which I'm a part of. But speaking publicly about my recovery is a different thing. And I don't know, I never felt a sense of shame. You know, I always felt like my family was proud of me, and my family and like my community was proud of me. You know, but I did go through a lot of recovery messaging training to be able to do that in a way that kind of kept me safe. And but there was a definite moment when I realized how lucky I was to have access to what I had access to, and that a lot of people don't have what I had. And so I needed to speak up in a more intentional way so that other people could have the same experience and same opportunities that I did.
It was a little different for me. I had to slowly build up to it, and some people out here are not going to believe this, but I was actually pretty shy and embarrassed about it when I first got out of treatment. I actually, outside of my immediate family, I lied. I told everybody that I was sick and in a hospital for the last month, and that's what was going on. But what had happened was I had to gradually, I worked my way up to it. So I was volunteering, just working the tables, the FOA tables at events like this one. We have one set up right over there. I was just handing out flyers, and just that initial contact with people, telling them what we did at FOA, I built upon that over like several months, and then I got to the point where I realized, hey, this actually makes me feel better about myself. It gave me a sense of value to be able to do that, and that was the first time I felt productive as a productive member of society in years. So that's what happened with me.
You were able to make something worthwhile and valuable out of that experience for other people.
Yeah, so the experience that I have as an addict, I did it for 15 years. That's the only thing I'm an expert at. And at my very first FOA meeting, there was somebody that was a parent that was asking a question, and I knew the answer to it. You know, it was a parent asking a question, why is my son behaving in such and such a manner? And I knew how to answer that question. That was the very first time that I felt valuable as a person in recovery and in society again. So.
5 minutes. That's only the second question. Well, let me make sure we speak to Danielle. So, how do you this? How do you think leaders in law enforcement can reach young people in the most effective way? And what are they doing right and what are they doing wrong?
Well, at the high school, we have law enforcement. We have officers who are working directly with the school who see things in the community, and they come and talk to people in Bold about different drugs and alcohol issues that are going on in the community, right here in the community. And they let us know what we should be focusing on in the schools. They let us know what the issues are and how we can help work with them and how we can connect with them and figure out what they are doing and what we're doing so we can make the most out of prevention for our students.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, sort of put a plug in for the Dayton Police. They impress me all the time, and they currently have a full-time officer who is paid full-time to go out to the community on grow calls. And it's just really impressive, and I think that youth and kids and even parents in that East End area seeing a police officer who really cares is a total shift in how we think about law enforcement. And the police officers that I work with really care and really want to do something about the epidemic.
Being mindful of time, I just say that, you know, the work that I did here, was really all about sort of showing kind of some of the darker parts of this problem in an effort to spur change, right? To get people's attention, to drive some sort of change forward. The other thing that drives change is hope. You know, people feeling like that there is a possibility to make a better future. knowing that we don't have a whole lot of time, I just kind of, with each of you, to sort of talk about where do you see hope in all of this at present? What's the bright light?
Go for it.
Okay, so in the high schools, we just like to promote that we are the majority. We are the majority of the students that are drug and alcohol free. And we like to bring that to the table, especially to our middle schoolers and elementary schools when we go and talk to them, when we tell them, make good choices because we are the majority. It may not look like it and you may not hear that, but we are. If you need that support, come find any of us. 100% drug and alcohol free, we are there to help you and to support you whenever you need necessary. So we are the majority.
So the question is, where do I see hope at? What inspires me the most is the success stories would probably be number one. That would be the biggest thing. Whenever I see somebody that's taken a horrible thing and done something positive with it, which is it's pretty tough to do. I'm always impressed to hear those stories. But also, it's very inspiring to see the government, especially law enforcement, working with the community the way that they are here. And I don't know if this is common across the nation or not, but I never noticed it anywhere else that I've been before, and it seems to be a really big deal here, and that certainly gives me hope. That makes me think that everybody's on board and wants to try and fix this.
Real quick, I'll just add, I see hope every time we do what's called Conversations for Change in the community, and we typically do that every other month, and the stories I hear from people that come back are incredible. Early on, this was about three years ago, a woman got the Project Dawn Narcan training, and she came back the next time, and we had a sort of a round table, and she was crying, and she was thanking law enforcement and Project Dawn because she used her Narcan kit to save a family member. And so, that little bit of hope, sprinkles through Conversations for Change when we put it on, and that provides hope for me.
Yeah, I've been to those events. They're pretty amazing.
And then the only other thing I would add is just the number of different stakeholders that are showing up and really getting involved in this issue. It's going to take all of us, and I think this room is a great example of that.
How did I do? On time? Hey, Lori. Do we have time for one more question, or shall we? Okay. Hey, Leslie.
I want to thank you so much for bringing forward a very hard topic for our community. And one of the things that our community's done, if everybody can look over where East Greenwich Community's booth is, we put a banner together this summer that says Twin Towers stands united against drugs. And we had over 1,000 residents in the Twin Towers neighborhood sign this banner along with the city commission and the mayor. So change is possible,
yes.
And communities can come together and make change in their community. And I thank you so much for having the courage to come to our neighborhood and not hide the truth.
Thank you, Leslie. It was it was an honor to be there and to be welcomed by everyone there, and to feel like we've helped out a little bit. All the amazing people there trying so hard. So thank you. It's good to see you. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Want to photobomb their selfie there. How you guys? Is everybody still doing well? Everybody still having fun? These speakers have been just fantastic, haven't they? Holy moly! Well, we do have another speaker. Alexis Gomez is also here. I just saw her in back. She's going to do another song for us in a little bit. But first, we want to talk about our next speaker. You guys are going to be very impressed with them. Our next speaker is from CADCA. That stands for Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, who is a major partner in the DEA 360 initiative and co-facilitator of this great event. General Barry Price currently is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at CADCA. However, before his time with CATCA, General Price served in the U.S. Army for 31 years. He served on several presidential task forces, is an author, and received many military awards and decorations, including the Distinguished Service Medal. His passion for prevention is deep within his soul. His story will tell you why. Please help me welcome General Barry Price.
Shaft, Q Shaft. Thanks much. Bam. Good evening. Good evening. I know that the hour is growing late and that I have the fortune or misfortune of being next to last. Yeah, and so hopefully you haven't worn you out too much. Hey, I'd like to ask you to take a look at a picture, and I'm going to date myself, and this is 1985 in Houston, Texas. This is my car, a Renault Alliance, which they don't make anymore, but that was a pretty nice car in that time. And if you can look in the window, you can see that it's full of stuff, right? 2 days earlier, on this picture, I graduated from the University of Houston and was commissioned to come into the Army. And these are my two good friends and my fraternity brother. This is me. It's dark, so you can't really see me very well on there, but believe me, that's me. And if you could see these, that's a Houston shirt and that's some red shorts. Back in those days, Daisy Dukes were what you wore naturally. But those were some hot pants. This is my fraternity brother and good friend, Stan Wilson Bay, and this is my dear friend and my fraternity brother and the guy who I went to high school with, Carl David Holmes. Carl was a transfer to the University of Houston from Purdue, majored in electrical engineering, had a 3.9 in electrical engineering from Purdue and transferred to the University of Houston. Carl was my dear friend from high school. Carl was a guy who, when he put his mind to something, he just did it. Carl was a guy who didn't run track, had no significant speed, but decided he wanted to be on the track team in high school. And by the time he was a senior, won the quarter mile for the state of Indiana in high school. Carl was a guy who in 9th grade saw me coming from a banquet, and I was wearing a suit, and he asked, "Where are you coming from?" I said, "I'm coming from a banquet that the school hosted for people who made all A's on their report card." He said, "So they had a banquet for you guys for making all A's?" And Carl was just an average student at that point. And I said, "Yes." And Carl put in the work and became an honor student, graduating at the top of his class in 1981. Carl was a phenomenal guy. Carl was an ROTC scholarship recipient at the University of Houston, was due to come in the Army, and Carl would become exposed during my last semester of college to crack cocaine. Carl was a groomsman in my wedding 10 months later, and at the bachelor party was when I realized that Carl was addicted. If you were to recount 30 years, 31 years that I was in the service, 30 of those years, Carl was in addiction. While I was getting early promotions, commanding large formations, Carl was losing his home, losing his family, going back to Indiana, even being excommunicated from the church, of all things. If you were to consider Carl's plight, while things were happening great for me, things weren't going so well. for Carl, and I had no tools and no ability to help him. While I was writing books and earning advanced degrees, Carl was losing everything that he had dedicated his life to. 2 years ago, on this day, Carl died, still in addiction, homeless, penniless. And Carl's death is why I'm at CADCA right now. Because I couldn't help Carl. I realized that just saying no wasn't enough. I shared with Todd a little earlier that, Todd, I see you over there, that, Todd, I was so moved by Todd's message today because I wish I had a Todd to talk to when I desired to help my friend. This picture sits on my desk at my office in a prominent place every day. Because every day that I'm at the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, I want to see Carl's face because it gives me passion, it gives me motivation to do exactly what CADCA does, which is we teach the science of prevention. That is abstinence. That is stopping it before it ever starts. Let me give you a couple of, for instances, of did you know? Did you know that last year, the nation, our nation, lost 64,000 people to the opiate crisis? 64,000 deaths from opiate overdose. 64,000. Now, if you think about that, you think about this coming Sunday, the Cincinnati Bengals will play the Pittsburgh Steelers in their stadium in Cincinnati. That stadium holds 65,514 people. Imagine, if you will, that everybody but 1,500 people would lose their lives in that stadium this weekend. That's what our nation lost last year to this crisis. That's why we're doing this summit today. So what can you do? What can you do to curb the crisis? I will tell you that it's great that we're here at Wright State because kids, young people like Carl, who was 20 when he became addicted, kids between the age of 15 and 24 are really at the epicenter of this storm. That's the age. 25 is the age where the brain is fully formed. The science shows that. The science shows that the likelihood of becoming addicted after the age of 25 is really remote. The science shows, as Todd shared, that some are predisposed for addiction. But you can't tell by looking at somebody. You may be able to tell by some excessive and compulsive behaviors that you might see within the individual. But you really can't tell if somebody has the genetic markers that will show that they might become addicted someday. Carl certainly didn't show that. Go forward with me and think about this, if you will. 35% of the people who are addicted to opiates received a prescription from a doctor. 65% of the people who are addicted never had a prescription. 40% are receiving those drugs from friends and family. Friends, there's no malintent or ill will from those friends or family members. Twisted my ankle, playing basketball, intramural basketball. Hey, I have this. Barry, try this. Leads to something difficult, a bad outcome down the road. Here's what I'll tell you. There are some things that we can do to prevent this crisis and to play our part in the crisis. First thing we can do is when we have an injury or an ailment that requires a painkiller, we could say to our doctors, hey, how about what are some of the things that I can take in lieu of an opiate? Would acetaminophen work? Would ibuprofen work? Would physical therapy work? Would osteopathic therapies work as opposed to opiates? Last week, I had a tooth extracted from my mouth, and I went to the doctor, and he gave me 14 hydrocodones. Take them every 4 hours as needed. 14. I took 2, got the pain under control, and then I switched to Tylenol. Pain was under control. Tylenol did the trick. I reached into my handy-dandy medicine cabinet, pulled out one of these Dexterra drug diversion pouches, which is an eco-friendly pouch, cost about $3. Tore that thing open, poured in the other 12 hydrocodones, put in a little warm water, shook it 3 times, sealed it, threw it in the trash. Eco-friendly, drug diversion right in my home. That's a solution. And guess what happened to those drugs? They came out of my medicine cabinet. They came out of circulation as a result of using that. That's a tool that each of us can employ. If you have a Carl in your life, if you have someone that you've seen has gone down a path, a destructive path that you know that it's going to be a difficult outcome, I would ask that you have a brief intervention, that you refer them to treatment, that they might get the help. I would also ask that we apply a type of pressure that we never talk about, which is the positive pressure, and convince people and encourage people for abstinence, of stopping it way upstream before it ever happens. It's okay to not imbibe. That's my message to you. Thank you for your time tonight, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for retiring of the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
All right, well, we want to give a final round of applause for all of our great speakers tonight. Did they have some stories? Just excellent. I also want to quickly acknowledge all of our wonderful vendors who are set up all around the seating area here. If you haven't had a chance, please stop by and say hello. Yeah, let's give them a round of applause, too. They're doing some excellent work. That's what this is all about, is a collaborative effort to stop the opioid epidemic. All right, so Alexis Gomez is going to be coming up here in a second. And before she does, I want to remind you, if you're interested in, saying hello, maybe getting an autograph, she's going to be positioned right over this direction, right over there. She's going to be signing autographs, saying hello. So stick around when she's done singing, and you can say hello, maybe get an autograph. So thank you all very much again. Thank you very much to all of our sponsors, all the great vendors out here. Thank you to CADCA for helping to host this, and of course the Drug Enforcement Administration for helping to put on this tremendous event. Thank you, and thank you all for coming.